This is Flowers on the Stage.
Mindfulness to me at this point in my life in February of 24 is like everything. It's my why and my bottom layer, my foundation. I like can't drum up the enthusiasm that I used to have for having business conversations when what I see is everybody struggling.
Mhm.
Everybody is struggling. We have just had the hardest 4 years in any kind of recent history. And people feel so alone and so scattered and disjointed and lost and broke, or you have money but like you don't want to spend it because you don't know if the bottom's going to fall out of the world again in the next 5 years, and like there's war and we have to look at all these images and there's all these pressures from, and it's like holy shit, oh my god, what the fuck, like I feel like it is an exceptionally hard time to be a human. So I
Mhm.
made this daily planner called the Mindful Musicians Daily Planner. And I based it off of all these other daily planners that I've seen that are like, what are you doing today? And I was like, no, I want my musician friends to think about how they want to feel today. And so it's like, how's your mood? What are you grateful for? What are you going to eat today? What's one thing, one goal that you want to accomplish today? And the daily planner is kind of the foundation for like what I think I'm going to do next, which is to help guide people toward some kind of holistic wellness so that they feel better on a day-to-day basis. And if you don't feel good, it doesn't matter what your skill set is, and it doesn't matter how you set up your business because you're not going to get out of bed.
Mhm.
You're like, you're just not. You can't do all these things that you want to do if you're anxious or you're depressed or you haven't moved or you haven't had any water or you're vitamin deficient, all the different things.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful thing because I have a brother and a father who both spent a long time as touring musicians, and what I've heard from them is, touring is great, doing the show is great, but everything around it is so
Yeah,
difficult.
so
And
much. Yeah.
you go and you feel like, you're a king, you're a god, you're a queen, whatever you
Yeah.
are. You have this whole group of people looking at you, giving you adoration, and
Yeah.
then you go and get into a cramped box
Hmm.
with, four other people who feel the exact same way you do, and you go to the next thing. So
Hmm.
it's that I love the idea of you just reminding those musicians and artists to take a moment for themselves.
And there's like so many little things that you can do along the way to like grab little micro moments and you know try to help yourself feel better. One mindfulness to me, there's this image, you might have seen it, where it's a guy walking his dog and it's from the back and it says like mindful, Full, as two separate words, and it's got like a thought bubble, and it's money and work and car, and it's like all of the things that like fill our heads all day. And the next image, the second comic, it says mindful, Full, one word. And that thought bubble is what you see in the graphic. So it's like the trees and the dog. And the idea behind it is to get yourself out of your thoughts and to be where you actually are and to touch base with your senses. When you're worrying about whatever, you're not finding a solution to it. You're just causing all of this commotion inside your body when like the moment around you is happening without you.
What do you think is the best advice you could give someone like me who's a young businesswoman with big aspirations?
Ooh, network. Meet all the people who are doing the things that you're doing. Talk to them, ask them questions. Everybody loves talking about themselves. Well, most people do. Because, and don't burn any bridges. The people that you meet all have something for you. And you're in the same place at the same time for a reason. So utilize that experience that, you know, like whatever it is that you do that you want to learn about. Anytime you're in a room with somebody who does what you do, you know, it doesn't have to be like a deep conversation, but pick something up from them, make a good impression, find a way to keep in touch, follow them on LinkedIn and Instagram. You know, like I can't tell you how many times just replying to people's Instagram stories starts an actual relationship. Art is a very relationship based industry, and those relationships are, the relationship part is probably like 50% of the whole job, where then like the operations and the marketing and everything else fits into the other 50.
So you run a business and you're a mom, which sounds pretty stressful. So I'm curious what you do to keep yourself motivated and level-headed on a daily basis.
Oh gosh, I scream into the void. No, I'm just kidding. That has actually been really challenging for me over the past 3 years, 4 years now, almost. The whole like self-care as a mom thing, it's real hard. So for me personally, I have a day job, and I shifted my work hours to be like 11 to 6 or 11 to 7, so that I could have 9 to 11 all to myself. So I drop my kids off at school and I go do yoga, or I take a nap, or tomorrow I'm going to get acupuncture, you know, stuff like that. I've gotten massages. I usually go to yoga, take the dog for a walk. You know, I do a lot of meditating. CBD gummies help a lot. And quitting drinking alcohol helped me be a better parent so much. Like parenting hungover is probably the 8th layer of hell. I do not recommend parenting with a hangover at all. 0 out of 10. So I couldn't drink anything without getting hungover. So I just quit completely. And that made me a much, much, much better mom. Yeah, I go see music as much as I can. That's really like my happy place is live music. I'm a big time live music fan. So whenever I can hire a babysitter and get out of town, I do. Yeah. I work with somebody who like doesn't care at all about what they're not doing. They don't think about it. They don't care. It's not their job. They don't care.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating.
Ignorance is bliss kind of folks.
Yeah, exactly. Because we'll be like, hey, do you have the answer to this question? And they'll be like, that's not my job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that automatically makes them bad at it.
Yeah.
Just the fact that the buck doesn't stop with you means that you're not doing it right. So if you care, you're probably doing better than you think you are.
I love that.
Yeah, like so much just comes back to stepping up and caring.
Just show up. Just show up and take ownership over what you did and what you said and how you felt and how you reacted. You know, I think a lot of people's like internal turmoil comes from their own reactions to things. And so if you can control your own emotions and control your reactions, and it's like the pathway between having a thought, having a feeling, and reacting to it, that whole thing can happen in like half of a second. And you never had a chance to like say, do I want to react like this? You know, like somebody comes up to you and flicks you on the forehead and you just like instantly slug them in the gut, right? And like, no, maybe you take a break, you take a deep breath, and you go, how do I want to react to this? And that's what meditation taught me, is it's like, I have a thought. that thought triggers a feeling, or I have a feeling and the feeling triggers a thought. It can go either way. And then I take a breath and I notice it. And the phrase that I say to myself is, oh, I notice myself feeling so-and-so, or I notice myself thinking. That like removes me from it. I sometimes, if I'm really struggling with it, I'll picture whatever like the thought or the feeling is. I'll picture it on like a pedestal in an art museum. And I will literally imagine myself walking away from it. So I'm like, okay, I notice myself feeling really agitated about whatever just happened. I'm going to take that agitation, I'm going to put it right here. And then I take like 6 deep breaths and like just walk away from it. Like I literally like close my eyes. I'm like, okay, I'm walking away from the irritation. I'm not going to engage. Because then you have the choice. It's the only time that you have the choice of how to move forward is like, am I gonna act agitated? Am I gonna snap at somebody? Am I gonna lash out? Am I gonna beat somebody up? Or am I gonna choose a different path? And if you're like in it, then you can't choose a different path. It's impossible. You just react the way you habitually have yourself trained.
This is Flowers on the Stage, a podcast about being creative and finding success. To support it, please check out our sponsors, New Belgium Brewing, Thrax CBD, and Ticket Relief, the ticketing company that plants trees with a portion of each ticket sold. And now, back to the episode.
How does, on a personal level, music play a role in your life?
That's a great question. I noticed recently that I haven't been listening to music at all during the day. And I was like, is that why I'm not joyful anymore? You know, is that why I can't like drum up random joy throughout the day? So it's funny that because I was just talking about this with my therapist yesterday. Music for me is dance, very pointedly, like very specifically. And I found I didn't know I loved dancing until I started seeing Humphreys McGee. Started seeing Humphreys in 2003, and I was too cool to dance at the time. I was like college jam band girl, and Fish was on hiatus, so Humphreys was the coolest thing happening. And I had to sit and watch and listen and learn and get to know all of the notes, and I couldn't take my eyes off Chris because he's just a beast. So at some point in like 2004, I can't remember exactly. It probably was right around the same time that I started seeing like Sound Tribe and bands like that are like very dancey. I started to let myself go on the dance floor, so to speak. And I unlocked this part of myself that I didn't even know existed. And then I danced, and I saw Humphreys 75 times in 03 through 08. And I saw, I saw Sound Tribe and the Disco Biscuits and Benevento Russo and any band that came around. I went and I was like, can I dance to this?
So you must have seen countless shows in your life
Yes.
at this point. Do any stand out?
Yeah. Humphreys All Good 2005. That's like one of the best shows at the time that I ever saw. I don't know if it holds up. I don't listen to it anymore. Bonnaroo 04. All of it. Not like one specific show, but just like Bonnaroo 04 in general. It was crazy. A Bonnaroo 06. I'm trying to Sound Tribe. Sound Tribe played a House of Blues late night thing in Vegas in 2005 after Vegas. That was one of the best shows I had ever seen at the time. Part of why I had a hard time like unlocking joy lately in my own life is because I tore some tissue in my hip, and it took me like 3 years to get it fixed.
Wow.
and it got really painful. So I had to stop dancing if I wanted to be anywhere near functional. And like losing dance was really hard. Really, really hard. So I can dance again. Kinda. I can't just go like hog wild. But I'm only just now, since I toured in November of 2020, and I'm only just now rediscovering that part of myself. So
How was the transition from 2003 Fish hiatus, Humphreys tour, transitioning into sobriety, motherhood, running a business, helping musicians after a lifetime of seeing shows yourself?
it was very long and slow, and it did not happen overnight. Partying my ass off, just doing all the things that all the people do in 03, 04, 05, 06, 07. And in 2005, my dad got a cancer diagnosis. And that was really tough. My dad taught me about music, got me into like Pink Floyd, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Yes, Genesis, all the prog rock bands that prepared me to like Humphreys. So the idea of losing my dad made me lose my mind, and I drank way, way, way too much. Way too much. I ended up getting a DUI and had to sell my car. And since I didn't have a car, I moved to Chicago. I was like, I can live in Chicago without a car. I found a really cheap place to live. I got a job. I got a bike, and I started living a healthier lifestyle than I had been in the past. And then my dad died in January of 08.
Sorry to hear that.
And thanks. I didn't want to be drunk anymore after that. I was just like, all right, I'm kind of over this. Like it was sort of a wake-up call, but it was more of like I had been in so much pain that I knew once he was gone, the pain it didn't have such sharp edges anymore. And I didn't really like need the alcohol anymore. So I started to just kind of like cut back. One of the things that I noticed in the first time that I stopped drinking back in 08 was how often I was drinking because I was bored, because I was seeing bands that I didn't care about and I couldn't dance to, and then, and that weren't that good. And I just didn't care. I was only going for the alcohol. So sobriety helped me kind of like refine myself down to only doing what I actually like doing and actually care about.
Yeah. Well, I think that's thank you for sharing that very personal story. And I think that's a story that a lot of people can relate to, the trials and tribulations of life leading them to finding their passion though at the end of it. If you do work your way through it, which you found your new medium of helping musicians and artists who are bringing you so much joy, and your early 2000s years, which leads me to my next question. What are some of the biggest obstacles that specifically DIY musicians face when coming to you?
Yeah. Capital, money. A lot of musicians, a lot of people, a lot of humans don't have a lot of money that they can play around with and risk losing. So, if you want to go out on a tour, you have to get there. You have to like get a car, and you have to get the stuff, and you have to put the stuff in the car, and you have to get insurance, and you have to drive it. And you might not make any money at that show, and you might have just done it all for free, and you might have $1,000 worth of merch that, you know, nobody bought.
Mhm.
And so that can be a huge obstacle. It's a really tough one, and it's very hard to overcome, especially the younger that you are or the more alone that you are. And then to get a little bit more specific, the road, being on tour is a really hard obstacle for a lot of people. Finding the place to sleep, being in the car with people all the time, eating junk food on the road all the time is a huge problem for a lot of people, because then you feel like shit. And when you feel like shit, you don't play well. And then there's, you know, external factors of like gear getting stolen or losing things or things breaking and you can't afford to replace them. But at the end of the day, it pretty much all just comes back to money and having enough money and being able to afford the lifestyle that you want.
Can you talk to us about what some of the main like discovery questions that you would ask an artist who's just kind of starting to go out on tour and is looking for advice? So like what are the first things you need to know about their situation in order to be helpful?
Yeah, the most important thing is if they're in a business with another person or not.
Mhm.
So if it's only you're the only artist, you're the only owner, the only songwriter, the only person who's putting any money in, then you're going to have a different situation for self-employment than if you're partnered up with somebody.
Mhm.
So that's always the very first question that I ask is it you alone, or do we have to consider other people's opinions as we move forward through this? And it matters a lot. When people first call me, they're usually starting to make money years into whatever their chosen career is. So most of the time, they've already gotten started. They're already out there. They either had a day job while they were building their music career and they want to quit the day job, or they just graduated from school and, you know, they spent 4 years of college building up this project and now they're ready to go out and they don't want to get a job. So like, how do I avoid getting a day job? So if you're just getting started, you just graduated from school, it's you alone, then the first thing that we have to figure out is what's important to you. And the reason for that is because when push comes to shove and life gets really hard and the storm is brewing, that value system that you've created, that like what's important kind of like foundation, is going to support you. If you are basing your entire business on something that's not actually important to you, when it starts to crumble, you're not going to have the fight in you to actually make it last. So I always ask people at the very beginning, what are your business's core values? And how do you exemplify them in the work that you do? So if one of your core values is optimism, how do you show that on a day-to-day basis? And if one of your core values is fame and popularity, are you going to be able to keep going when you're not famous and you're not popular? And I would also ask the same question to all the groups, the partnerships, or, you know, if you've been doing it for a long time, that's really like where you start is what's important to you, what's your why, what are your core values? The next question becomes, what are you so good at that you can't avoid people asking you to do it? And everybody was born with some kind of natural gift that they just like doing, and it might not be their career. It might be a hobby or just a passion project, but everybody has something that they're like, so can I swear?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody had something that they're so fucking good at that like your grandma will be like, can you just come over and help me with that thing that you're really good at? Because I can't find anybody else that does it as good as you. That thing, if you can make that skill link up with what's important to you and what your passions are, you're going to have a much easier time at work. What are you super good at? How can we link it up with your passion? And then let's set some goals. And that the goals part can get really tricky for some people. My friend Ari Herstan uses the music as a marathon idea, and he likes people to set a 26-year goal. So if you think about your life 26 years from now, where are you? What are you doing? What have you accomplished? And then how do we get there in 10 years? How do we get there in 5 years, 3 years, and 1 year? Once we break that goal down to the 1 year mark, then we can set out a plan, like a literal plan where it's like, okay, by the end of this month, we're going to do this. And then by the end of the summer, we're going to do this. By the end of the third quarter, we're going to be here. And then next February, you're going to meet your goal, right? So that's where I would start with pretty much anybody. And what I've found is that starting with those questions breaks up the bands that we're going to break up anyway. And I hate to say that, but it's true. I can't tell you how many first meetings I've had where we covered that series and then I never hear from them again.
Yeah.
And they're like, we realized in that meeting how far off we all were from each other and that we have very different life goals. And we decided to just do solo projects instead. I mean, it's definitely more than 10 times that I have helped bands realize that they're probably not actually meant for each other, you know? So if we can get through that conversation and everybody's still super gung-ho about staying together and working through all the hard stuff and, you know, we had all those conversations without any big drama, then we can start to actually establish the business. And that starts with, you know, the basic stuff. What's your name? Is it available in your state? Is your website name available? Let's register the business. Are we going to have an LLC or are we going to have some other kind of entity? Who's going to be owners? Where's the money coming from? What bank do you want to choose? All those, you know, neat little logistical
Take us through those. Take us through those. So setting up a business, you're an artist and yeah, you've got a lot of confidence and you're saying, okay, let's make this formalized. Talk us through that.
Okay. The very first step to setting up a business is to register it in a state. So in the United States, everything's at the state level. So the first thing that you want to do is go to your own state's business directory and make sure that your name is available. Make sure that the business that you want to start can be started. You know, if you want to call your business McDonald's, they're not even going to let you register it. So it's got to have a unique name and you have to have the funds available to register it. In California, it's $800. In Michigan, it's $50. So sometimes the state that you live in discourages you from starting a formal business until you are really ready to actually start it. You have to start your business in a place where you have an address. So there was a time when websites like LegalZoom were encouraging business owners to establish their business in states that they didn't live in. And then LegalZoom would act as a registered agent and operate the business for you. But in my experience, it's really better, especially at the beginning, to hold on to that yourself and not necessarily outsource that registered agent part. So you want to, you know, people call me all the time and they're like, should I set up my corporation in Delaware? It's like, do you live in Delaware? No. Then why would you set up your corporation in Delaware? You know, and people want to avoid taxes and they want to jump through loopholes, but it's not as cut and dry as that. And I've learned this from like 15 years of doing it. Just set up the business where you live. It's so much easier to do it that way. So your in Michigan, it's, michigan.gov, and you go and you do a business search and you just look up your name. And then you can establish the business through a website without setting up an LLC. You don't need an LLC. I want to talk about LLCs for a minute, unprompted. LLC is a legal term, not a tax term. So when you set up an LLC, what you're doing is you're protecting the business's assets and your own assets from each other's liabilities. So like so let's imagine for a second that it's 20 years down the road. Cam, you're married, you have a big, beautiful house, you have tons of money in the bank, and you have a really successful company, and you have an employee, and that employee makes a mistake, and your company gets sued. If you're operating the LLC properly, only the business's assets are up for judgment. But if you're not operating the business properly, or you don't have an LLC, then they can come after your big, beautiful house and your private bank accounts and your spouse's retirement accounts if you're found guilty, and they need to get the money to pay the damages to the person who's suing you. If you don't have that LLC, it's called the corporate veil. If you don't have that, then they can just come and take whatever you have. So setting up an LLC and operating it properly is really important if you have assets that need to be protected. But getting back to your original question, you can set up a business without an LLC. You just go to the website and just literally register the business, and it doesn't have to be an LLC. So if after talking with your partners or your lawyer or your accountant or me, you decide that you do want an LLC, then you're going to want to set that up either before you register with the state or right at the same time. And I used rocketlawyer.com, which I thought was really great to set up my LLC. I didn't use LegalZoom because it was more expensive, and they always push to be your registered agent, and I just don't like LegalZoom. Not sponsored.
Lots of LegalZoom shade being thrown here. I love it.
I just want to make it clear to the listeners that it's not the best resource for doing it yourself.
It's
even
convenient.
though, they really want to be. They really want to be the resource. And then they kind of like take advantage of people who don't understand what's actually happening. So if you want an LLC, if you need an LLC, if you have assets to protect, or you're going to have employees, I think the best way to describe it is if the business is actually separate from you yourself, then you're going to want to set up an LLC and treat the business separate from you. If you are the business, you don't need an LLC, because if you get sued, they're going to come after your personal stuff anyway. And a lot of times the LLC doesn't hold up in court anyway, because people don't follow all the rules. The money's all mixed up and there's no paper trails, and people are like, why do you even have this LLC? It's not, the business isn't separate from you, right? But I'm not a lawyer. So if you have like actual serious questions about this, it's worth it to talk to a lawyer, whatever they charge, $3.50 an hour. They would take 20 minutes for them to, explain to you whether you need one or not. But if you're in a partnership, if you have any other people involved, if you have substantial assets that you need to protect, either the business's assets or your own personal assets, then I always recommend that people have one.
Can you give us some examples of like why you may not recommend for someone to file as an LLC, or any type of, sole proprietorship or anything like that?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a time when having an LLC is not advisable. And it's really a matter of whether or not you're going to operate your business separate from yourself. If you're not going to operate the business separate from yourself, and you are the business, and the business couldn't function without you, then you might not need it. But I'd say,
For example, a solo musician. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
John Smith music.
yeah.
Is that an example right there?
Is John Smith Music going to hire a tour manager?
Potentially. Yeah,
Then they should have an LLC.
got it.
You see what I mean? It's like, it gets to the point where it's like, if you're going to hire somebody that is working for you and representing you, then you want to protect your home life from their mistakes. Does that make sense? So I can't, I can't sit here in this chair right now and think of a time when I would tell somebody they should never get an LLC. It's more of like, do you need it now or can you wait?
Okay.
Does that
I
make
have a
sense?
question follow up
Yeah.
to that on the
Yeah.
on the back end of LLC. So would you think that having an LLC versus just registering yourself as a business benefit you when tax season comes around?
Not even a little bit. The IRS doesn't care at all if you have an LLC or not. They don't care. They don't think about it. It has no implications whatsoever on your taxes.
So there's no tax break for small business
Nope.
owners.
Not as an LLC. It's actually, it can be more expensive in certain states.
Yeah.
It's the only time that an LLC matters is if you're in court.
Okay. Yeah. So at the bottom of it, it's just protecting you and your assets if you so happen to get sued.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I do have a lot of people call me in December and they're like, you got to help me set up an LLC before the year's over. And it's like, it doesn't really matter. You're going to file your tax return the same way that you would have if you didn't have the LLC. You're either going to file it as a Schedule C, as a sole proprietorship. Now, I want to pause myself right there and say that if you want to be a corporation, like you want to file a corporation tax return, or you're in a partnership, then you really should have an LLC. You at that point you need one.
Right.
Because when you set up a partnership, you're substantially saying the business is separate from me because it's with this other person. Or when you set up a corporation, you're saying, I intend to bring in shareholders, and that's a totally separate entity. So if you want to start a partnership or a C Corp or an S Corp, then the very first thing you should do is set up the LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Corporation or company. Yeah.
You're amazing. Thank you so much for joining us here. This has been so fucking awesome.
Oh, you're welcome.
You definitely, deserve a round of applause. Adam's got one more question for you. Before that, talk to us about the ideal kinds of situations and potential people who might, benefit from working with you.
Oh, yeah. So if you're at the beginning of your career and you're having a hard time pulling it all together or starting, or you're at a turning point in your career where you know that you're about to up level, like you have some kind of deal in the works, or you need to hire somebody, or like you just went up a tax bracket, you can call me. I can definitely help guide all of those transitions. And if you need your taxes done and you don't want to do them yourself, you can call me. If you need help with mindfulness or wellness, or you don't really know where to start with getting better, quote unquote, like feeling better, I can help with that. Yeah, that probably covers all of it.
I love it. Adam, you got it.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So going back, you mentioned you spent time in Chicago, which obviously has one of the largest comedy scenes in the United States. So have you worked with any comedians, and is there anything that a comedian needs to do differently than a musician?
Comedians and musicians really have the same job, which is to make people feel like you're talking directly to them and explaining their life to them in a way that they can relate to, right? And the thing I always tell people is if you just be your authentic self and you're vulnerable and you're proud of the shit that you've been through and you talk about it in a way that's yeah, that sucked at the time, but I got through it. People who are going through that or who just went through that or who have been there are going to find you and they're going to come to you and they're going to be like, oh, finally, I found somebody who gets it. So just be yourself. Just be your authentic self. Be weird. Be your kooky self that, you know, all the things that you're worried about, like, are they going to like me? Is this the right thing to say? Should I have said that? Those are all the things that you should be saying, because if they scare you, they'll help somebody else.
Absolutely. And from a business perspective, do you see comedians as really in that, same role as well, where they, even if they are that solo act, there is cause to protect themselves using an
Yeah.
LLC or?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's like this whole thing now about stealing jokes and putting them on TikTok.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you should have an LLC. I know that some comedians do have tour managers, that, people that go out on the road with
Mm.
them, they have managers, they have agents. So you'll want to have an LLC to protect yourself. And, it's like if a venue says you didn't show up, but you did show up and they sue you for loss of wages or, whatever, then how are you going to protect yourself?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think the same rules apply. I would say I think that comedy is a tougher business to succeed in than music. Personally, there's like fewer people that make it to that higher level.
Mm.
There's no like Lollapalooza for comedians, the way that there's like so many festivals that get comedians don't have the same kind of like sponsorship packages and all
Mhm.
that stuff. So it's definitely tougher. But if you can make people laugh, that is a feeling that they can't get anywhere else. So it's very valuable and people are willing to pay for that.
All right. Well, everyone out there, if you listen this far, we got links in the description, stephbelcher.com. Check out everything she's got going on. Follow her on socials, the planner, all that good stuff. Find her, get a one-on-one. Steph, so great speaking with you. Thanks again for taking the time, for joining us, and for, all your insights.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.